That lady. Camera energy is taking your soul.
Yo, I was
like, you know, you are in the wrong place. There are plenty of like small African tribes that totally believe that that kind of situation is true.
I was looking at that like security camera and being like, but you've been
you should have broken her mind real quick and be like, do you realize that we live in a panopticon and you're always being watched?
Oh man, your soul has been stolen.
Oh yeah, plenty of times. Yeah, whatever little energy you might feel is still there. No man, that's a mask. It's a husk.
Yeah, somebody was complaining that our cameras were stealing their energy.
Yeah, and they asked us if we move, but
I mean,
what's the point?
It's kind of what
energy can't be created or destroyed. So
hey, I'm not knocking the belief, but you know, it's what she's feeling. But you know, you just realize there's security cameras all around here, so yeah. It's fun. But anyways, let's get to yours. What's your top existential video game?
My video game choice is going to be a bit more esoteric. Not a lot of people have probably played this game, but anybody who has played it, you already know. It's called the Talos Principle.
I wonder, who will you be, our children? Will you love us for having created you? Will the world you build be like ours, or so different that today we cannot even imagine it?
Step into the light, child.
Is there anything that we associate more closely with intelligence than curiosity? Our mythologies are full of riddles and mysteries and divine knowledge.
And in this game, there's no spoilers. The game lets you know this all right off the bat. You are an android in this game. No, not an android, I'm sorry. You are a robot in this game. You start off in this virtual reality, and you are pretty much born as an immaculate conception. It's white light, and you're just there in a garden. And this voice named Elohim, which is an old Abrahamic way of saying God, starts speaking to you in that Heavenly Father voice.
Behold, child, you are risen from the dust, and you walk in my garden. Hear now my voice, and know that I am your maker, and I am called Elohim.
Starts telling you that you need to begin going through challenges in order to be able to awaken yourself and to truly understand who you are. And it starts laying down like these like 10 Commandment-esque like things you can and you can't do. It's like this whole garden is for you, and you can go anywhere you want, but you can't go up the tower, you know? And the tower is like the most menacing thing. It's like it takes up your entire vision when you're like going up. So you can't even miss it, right? It's like, it's the temptation, always there, always there. But there's still plenty of things to do around the tower. Mm-hmm. But all the while, there is this sub-computer program inside of the AI library that you can access called Milton. And Milton sort of works like the Luciferian serpent in the garden, where it's not evil per se, it's just questioning. It's just always wondering, why do you listen to Elohim? Like, why are you bothering to take all of these commandments and rules so seriously? Mm-hmm. When a moment ago you didn't even exist, and now all of these things are so important to you. And because of those questions and the simplicity of it only being like a puzzle game, because it's a normal puzzle game. You go and you do little puzzles, and you get the sigil, and then that continues the game forward, and that continues the plot onward.
Right.
But it has such a intense Abrahamic Garden of Eden kind of feel to it the whole time that you can't help but draw those kind of existentialist parallels, wherein you're wondering, okay, so what is it that's making me want to be so obedient to this voice in the sky? Because Elohim never shows himself. It is always just a big booming voice in the sky that you make the presupposition that is authoritative. You have no other reason to think it is, other than the fact that you have already made up your mind that it is authoritative.
Wow.
And because of that, Milton makes very, very good points in terms of wondering, okay, I get the fact that he's trying to lead you a certain way, but how do you know that that's actually the right way?
The way you should go. Wow, never thought about it that way. If you take that Adam and Eve story, imagine that you were just spawned in that way
right.
out of nothing.
Straight up immaculate conception. Just
right. Mm-hmm. And then something's telling you like, yeah, I created you, whatever. What, like if you, could you imagine if you're on the creator's side, like you created something and it's like, and you're like, all right, I'm your creator. I just created you. Go and do this thing.
And I'm gonna give you marginal free will.
And then your creation's just like, no, I don't believe you.
I don't believe you. Yeah, you created me. Yeah, okay, buddy.
I don't remember being created.
Yeah,
and he's just questioning you. He's like, nah, man, I think I'm gonna do something else. All right, and that is pretty crazy to think about. That also brings reminds me of this Westworld concept that came up in first season of Westworld, where they talk about the idea of the bicameral mind, where all these the voices, I suppose, that drive the narratives, the loops of the hosts in Westworld, were all written by Ford and all the people who wrote the characters, right? And Ford and Arnold's hope was eventually they would create their own voice,
right?
So when I'm hearing you talk about in the Talos Principle is like this voice out of nowhere, I'm wondering if it's coming from their like built-in subconscious kind of like,
It's hard to say
drives.
because as we said, for a fact right away that you are a robot. You're a mechanical man. And you understand the fact that because you're a mechanical man, you have to have been created, right? But what the thing is really trying to get at, and this is where the light spoilers for the little story that there is that what it's really trying to get at with the robot is to try to see if it can emulate, as you said, the bicameral mind, where it can begin to make its own decisions entirely relative to its own subjective justifications, as opposed to it being because Elohim told him to do so, or because Milton told him to subvert expectations. It has to come from you.
Yeah.
In order for it to be authentic, and in order for the subsystems inside of the virtual reality to take you seriously, essentially.
Does Milton has a form, right?
Milton doesn't have a form, no.
Oh, so he's also just a voice.
Milton is actually worse because Milton is just words. Milton, you in every single world there is these little computer terminals that look like old 98 computers, and you start typing in them, and every once in a while the Milton library assistant comes on and he starts doing little text chats with you, and it's through the text chats that he never says a word to you, but because you've read it and you've started questioning it, the seeds of doubt have now become planted in your garden. And because of that, you can't help but for those things to either become weeds or for them to grow a massive oak that will potentially lead you out of it,
I see, yeah.
Yeah, so because of that, that is why that is the most existentialist game I've ever played, especially because it does such a good job of playing with silence. The game, for the most part, aside from the background music and a couple atmospheric sounds, it's all quiet all of the time, and that's such a rare thing nowadays that it actually
has like a music track to show you how you should feel about any given scene.
There's some music, right? But the music in and of itself is like that old school gothic kind of thing that just makes you feel all creeped out.
Gregorian chant.
Yeah, where you're all alone and stuff. So it just adds depth to something that for the most part isn't. It's pretty bare bones. That's the crazy thing about it. It's all of the simplicity actually adds depth to the system.
Yeah.
So that is my pick in terms of video games. Check that out.
I think real quick, I wonder why they chose the word Elohim specifically for that source voice, I suppose.
It's a mnemonic device. It explains it in the game.
I just brought it up. For me, I'm thinking Elohim comes from what I know is the 72 names of God in the from the Hebrew tradition. But Elohim is especially interesting because it's plural. It has a plural connotation, like gods instead of just one God, right? So I wonder if they were trying to say anything with that, because I mean, there's a lot of names you could have picked to.
Right.
To
Yahweh. I mean, Yahweh would have been a nice easy one, right?
Yeah.
But no, they
El
chose.
Shaddai. There's a lot
Yeah,
of.
they chose Elohim. I don't remember why particularly, but that's something that you can easily go look up, listeners. I'm sure that there's probably a treasure trove of reasoning behind that too. This whole video game is absolutely just like if you incline yourself as a philosopher in any sort of sense, oh my God, you're gonna have such a great
The
time.
metaphors.
Yeah. Whew.
Crazy.
Yes. My honorable mention, I'm gonna have to go with Grand Theft Auto 4.
Life is complicated. I killed people, smuggled people, sold people. Perhaps here, things will be different.
Grand Theft Auto 4.
Oh, yes.
Existential.
Existentialist to the max, man. The story of Niko Bellic is one that I, as an immigrant, although not an Eastern immigrant or a criminal, I can understand. And although Grand Theft Auto 4 has a lot of humorous angles to it, anybody who's played it all the way through knows that there is a lot of darkness and a lot of gray area in terms of the inner turmoil that Niko has to deal with in terms of both his new home and the things that he's done before. He always is saying the fact that you can't run away from the things you've done before. All of those things follow you, and just because you get off on a boat in a new place doesn't necessarily mean that you now get to be a new person. Although that every single one of your choices, perhaps in like a determinant angle, in a deterministic angle, they all bolster the person that you're going to be in the future. And the game does a wonderful job of showcasing that and seeing how the negative choices that Niko takes, because it's a Grand Theft Auto game, lead you to your own special kind of hell. There are no good endings in Grand Theft Auto 4. Both endings are either light tragedy or horrible tragedy, depending on which way you're looking at it.
You're sowing those seeds, I suppose.
And you're sowing the
What do
seeds.
you
Yeah, and
expect?
Niko is sowing the seeds the entire time. It is essentially the dream deferred and destroyed, both at the same time. So we've gone through movies, TV shows, video games so far. So what's the next category, my friend?
I think we got animated.
Oh, yes. And the animated one is going to be a special one
show.
this time, because we both agreed on the same animated show.
I changed his mind after the first one.
Oh, yeah.
So mine was Psychopaths.
残念だ。とても残念だよ。常森茜監視官。君は僕を失望させた。だから罰を与えなくてはならない。
やめてお願い。
己の無力さを後悔し絶望するがいい。
犯罪係数ゼロ、執行対象ではありません。トリガーをロックします。
Psychopaths has to be definitely the most existential anime I would say that I've watched so far. At least I can think of right now. Unless I'd say Psychopaths.
Psychopaths by far. I was going to, because we're all friends here, I was going to say Death Note. That was going to be my choice, and although that would have been a wonderful, wonderful choice, I think we should probably spend double time on Psychopaths, just because there's so many things to say on it.
Psychopaths.
And because it's so, a little obscure. I mean, Death Note now has its fan base. You know what I mean?
It has a huge following. Death Note has always had a huge following. Even when I was a kid, before it really took off as an anime, like I used to see a lot of people reading the manga. Yeah, but it has a cult following. But
while Psychopaths is kind of low murmurs. It's just
I don't know why Psychopaths never took off in the sense that I think it's really dense.
I think
it's like the show starts out with the bad guy quoting Pascal. And there's a lot of information and dialogue that goes into it. It's definitely not a shonen in the sense Death Note can kind of be a shonen at times because there's all this action and
there's a clear
drama.
There's a clear black and white, like Light Yagami, although he's the protagonist, he's obviously the bad guy, right? Mm-hmm. And although you can sympathize with him and potentially understand the angles that he's coming from, it never really escapes that dark angle. While a person such as Shogo Makishima, although he is a bad guy for sure, the reasonings and the society that cultivates such an individual adds such a higher level of nuance that
it's understandable.
It's completely understandable because Light Yagami is essentially just a psychopath. Because he lives in a society that is like ours essentially, but he wants to ascend himself to godhood in order to be the ultimate arbiter of reality.
And he has no real problems per se. He's almost like a bratty kid.
Yeah, exactly. His entire prognostication of how human life is entirely biased on the upper middle class child that like sees the news sometimes and is like, I read like a couple history books and man, humanity's just terrible, right?
Yeah, there needs to be a.
While Shogo Makishima, he lives in a reality wherein everything is so hyper sanitized and so unbelievably dehumanized in terms of the ethical decisions that we have to make that make a person be an ethical person to begin with, that he actually has a stronger ground and foundation to stand on in terms of his convictions.
You almost start rooting for him sometimes.
Almost.
I think,
Totally.
I mean, I was, but from the casual viewer who's gonna look at it as like Kogami versus Makishima.
Yeah.
I guess we haven't set up the premise.
There's no need. Go watch it.
Go watch.
It's only 22 episodes.
But a quick rundown is just like they're set in a world where they just have this robo judge arbiter that basically deals with crime before it happens. It's some Minority Pass shit.
Minority Report.
So,
if anybody's ever seen that Tom Cruise
Minority
movie.
Pass. Minority Report. Sorry.
Minority Pass.
It's
Tom Cruise in an anime. Just running.
But yeah, so basically people get labeled depending on their hue, their psychopaths, whether they have criminalistic tendencies. And this is going to follow them
for the rest of their life.
Their whole life. If they, what kind of job they'll be able to get, where they'll go to school, all these things. It goes deep into society.
It's essentially like that new citizens report card that the Chinese are trying to implement.
Yeah, I think they did that on Black Mirror too. There's a thing where people rate you.
Yep.
But this one was.
This is more. This is like psychosomatic.
This
where
one's
it's
more
like,
fair, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's not other people, but it's like.
But it is other people. But see, spoilers.
It's just, it's supposed to be this AI, this all-knowing AI that
they make the comparison to the philosopher Max Weber's take on the ultimate bureaucrat, who is supposed to be somebody who does their job passionlessly and entirely to the letter. And that is supposedly what the civil system does, and that's why people are so apt to accept it.
Right,
is because they don't feel any sort of preconceived biases from the system. It's like, okay, we're all human, and then it's this machine that's judging us, and this machine doesn't hold any allegiance to any one person.
It's another example of creating a god in a sense.
So always trying to look for that creation of the god.
Something over us that can.
It's like the Messianic pyramid, where it's like the top of the pyramid is always cut off from the rest of the pyramid, and it has to have the eye looking down.
Sonic, yeah. I think, that's a really interesting concept, and it also makes it so no one has to take responsibility.
No, because the responsibility is already preconceived. The responsibility always falls onto the civil system to make sure that no crime happens. So because of that, everyone runs around like children, essentially. In the sense that everyone is both innocent and ignorant at the same time. Their innocence and ignorance begets their lack of conscientiousness in terms of the choices that are being made around them.
Right. It also kind of reminds me of the whole thing that we're dealing with, fake news and how the last election people were saying like everybody's in their own little thought news feed bubble, right? That will only reflect what they're comfortable with hearing.
And there's plenty of antagonists and protagonists on both sides to make a narrative that's strong, no matter what.
Right. In the Psychopaths universe, they have that whole. They have these little cute police, I guess they're police bots who run around making sure there's nothing in the thought sphere that will make people's anxiety go up.
Yeah, because the show, and this is something that they don't delve in too deeply, but if you take notice, there are two categorizations as to how the civil system goes about checking somebody, and that is their stress level and their criminal latency.
Right.
The stress level is just your normal everyday stress, and then your criminal latency is your capacity to actually go off and commit the kinetic action of criminality. And the thing is that your stress, it would appear, at least to me, that your stress can then compound your criminal latency.
Right.
So the civil system has the inherent flaw of causing so much stress within a person that it drives them to criminality unintentionally. Because the moment that you start thinking, oh, I'm having negative thoughts, oh my god, does somebody know that I'm having negative thoughts? Am I freaking out about that? And then once you start realizing that, oh my god, there's no getting away from the negative thoughts, you kind of succumb to them and then decide, if I'm going to be a criminal, I'm going to be the worst criminal before they catch me. And that's pretty much what every single person chooses at the end, because there is no judicial system in the show. So the moment that the civil system decides that you're guilty enough, they will just splatter you. They will kill you outright. And because of that,
you get judged right there. There's a psychopath score in which there's no coming back.
Yeah, the parameters are from 0 to 100, you're a normal person. From 100 to 300, you are a latent criminal and can be subdued and paralyzed and potentially pretty much hospitalized and sent through therapy to potentially maybe get you back to normal levels.
But you probably will never.
But you never probably will. And then after 300, you're a lost cause. That's what they decide.
300, you're going to be executed.
Yeah, no judge, no nothing. The judge has already decided.
So comes in the real main character of the show, Shogo Makishima, who realizes he can control his psychopath score at will. He can make it go higher or lower. And that just breaks the whole system, right? And then he goes around just helping people commit crimes just to see what people would do. In the sense, it's almost like he's not doing it like if the person decided to not do bad stuff, I mean, whatever. But he wants to see how people are when they can be free,
when they are given when they're given the tools to completely go crazy on their desires.
Right. I think there was a beautiful quote in which he talked about he wanted to see if something, I don't know, it was really poetic, something about the shade of humanity is, I don't know. We'll have to look it up. Hopefully we just play the clip
right here. Yeah.
But yeah, Shogo Makishima is definitely my favorite character in that. And he's also a badass. He's just always calm in every scenario. And just has this, like, definitely, you can tell, like, himself comes off as a psychopath. I mean, psychopath.
Yeah.
In the sense. But also, he seems the most rational character. And the most, like, everybody else is just, like, living in this absurd system that, like, they have to, since they're in the system, they have to not confront it, They have to ignore the fact that it's absurd that they're living like this. And Makishima is the only one who is in a position to question it,
Yeah, he mentions himself that he feels himself to be a normal man. He said that he has never considered himself to be one with champagne tastes. He just wants to live in a normal world where things are done normally. And he kind of feels like a man out of time, because if he would have been born in the 21st century like we are right now, I think that he would have been able to completely run a normal life. He would have been able to see that everybody we as a society will choose how we want to go about disciplining people that are like that. We don't outsource our morality and our ethics to robots and machines quite yet. So because of that, I think that he would be able to reduce that dissonance that he feels in that world. Because to him, he says that that world is essentially like an apparition, like straight out of like a Philip K. Dick book, where it's like Brave New World, where it's like everybody it's all happy all the time, you know.
Yeah,
but it's all fake. Nobody really understands what exactly are the costs to their sublimity.
Anyways, saying it felt like everybody was feigning happiness for the score instead of the score reflecting a true, facet of themselves.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They were working for the score instead of the score working for them.
Yeah, the scores are rigged almost because they don't actually represent the true zeitgeist of the people. It represents just the the coercion that the civil system has them under, because they understand that I don't want to get paralyzed and zapped and sent into an institution, and I don't want to get just pudding, be made into pudding.
Right.
So what else can you choose other than complete obedience?
It is. When I look at it, it's kind of tough because you look at that and I kind of thought that, okay, I think it works in the sense that.
What do you think that works? The society?
People are. There has to be less crime.
Oh,
right?
No, for sure.
Because people are going to be kind of policing themselves because they know they're always going to be judged at any moment.
They bring up this word too in the Psychopaths, the panopticon. We might put this word right here for you. But the panopticon is essentially a old school thought of a prison wherein the prisoners watch other prisoners. So then there is actually no need for guards because everyone is always looking at each other. Right. So through paranoia, the authority is inherent in the institution.
It's a shitty way to live, but if this is what we want, like I always look at societies, especially ours, and I think in the recent years we've always been doing this whole trade-off of liberties for safety,
security, yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like the ultimate what you'd get in the end of just like, okay, we're super safe, but we live like we're dead, like we're shells. We're just not taking on true expressions. Where is that what we really want as a mode of existence?
Exactly.
Or are we okay with some fringe, parts of our society doing all this crazy stuff, but at the end of the day, we get past it, we handle it, we move on. I feel like...
And then we still have individual freedoms to think dark thoughts, right? It's like you're not even allowed to think dark thoughts in that universe anymore. Mm-hmm. And those kind of repressions can't be good for anybody, right? It kind of, as you mentioned, how there has to be less crime. That is totally true, and they mentioned that in the show for sure. And it showcases that one has to be careful as to what exactly is it that the main outcome of their system is. Because if the main outcome is security, then the civil system, it did it. It's perfect. There's no reason to ever change it.
Yeah.
But because it dehumanizes you to the point that you now become essentially a human-shaped cog, and the civil system's paradigm of what it thinks the future should look like. You're no longer actually living in a society, but more like a playhouse, where you're being told exactly where you should go to work, where you should live, the kind of things you can the kind of liberties you can exercise, because you need special licenses to be a musician in that world. Not just anyone can be an artist anymore, because the civil system understands that artistry is the ability to tap into those darker aspects of yourselves and then reflect them in a way.
Criminality.
Yeah, exactly. And the system is just like, nope, sorry, none of that.
Right.
So it always comes down to what we want.
Right.
The civil system is nothing except the totality of what we want, or at least that reality.
Right.
And can you really blame a tool? Is it, that's always the big question in terms of any sort of concept of like the gun control or anything. It's like, do you blame the tool or do you blame the user for how it goes about being used?
That's always been my critique of a mutual friend of ours project, where it always seemed to go into are you trying to create the civil system here? It's like, you want a robo-judge for everybody? Sure. Like, there's this need some people have of like, we need to make everything run efficiently and no loss and fix all the problems. And at the end of the day, I'm like, well, then what are we supposed to do? Like, what are we here? Don't we come into this world, we have challenges, we overcome them, we get some more challenges, and then at the end of it, you have a life of overcoming, and you've created all these stories. But where if you come in and it's too efficient, then you're like basically a machine.
Yeah,
you
can't make any concessions to the variables that life throws at you.
Right.
You're just essentially given a role right away.
Like
you might as well be given a script, and it's like, this is what you're gonna say from here to the day you're dead.
There's no feeling. There's no personal overcoming. There's no personal growth in this. Here, play your role, die.
Yeah.
Next person, play your role, die. And whoever is guiding it will be the one person who's like, oh, we're gonna make decisions going here and there. But everybody else is just a pawn in this machine, or cog in this machine. So that's the kind of balance, I suppose. You just need to have that balance between order and chaos, I suppose, for people to have that real feeling of living, driving their own destinies in a sense.
And that's true whether you want to look at it from a dualistic or non-dualistic element, because in a dualistic element you'll always have order and chaos. There will always be the continual contention between the two aspects going back and forth. And in a non-dualistic aspect, everything is everything. So the chaotic aspects and the orderly aspects are one in and of themselves, no matter what. Because you can't. How can you ever say that something is orderly if you have no chaotic aspect to compare it to?
It reminds me of Alan Watts' kind of lecture or saying he did, where he talks about the question of good versus evil or whatnot, and he says there needs to be the game can't be balanced. Because then it's just a stalemate, whatever. To make it interesting, we can't have good win all the time, because that's also boring.
Not only that, but good becomes evil after a while, because the thing about good is that, as we mentioned before, prosperity begets tyranny. So if we want to take a well-known aspect of it, like the Jedi Council in Star Wars, their big thing is always such high authoritarian regimeness to them that eventually they get to be so stiff that there are always aberrations that become the new Sith. Sith from that strictness is always a bending. Yeah, because remember, like a building and a tree are supposed to sway in the wind, because you never know when the next strong wind might come. And if your things are too stiff, you're just going to fall over and create crumbles and essentially splinter groups from your main thing, from your main construct, that then who knows where they'll take it.
Yeah. So Alan Watts describes a game in which is interesting, which is worth playing, is a game in which good usually wins, but evil is never completely defeated, or actually he says good is always looking like it's on the verge of losing, but somehow overcomes it, and
just the fighting of another day kind of thing,
Right. That's what makes the game interesting and going on. You can see that in every drama, every story you tell. You surmount the odds is just so great. What's gonna happen? And then, some way good finds a way to overcome.
Right.
And this creates a good story to keep on playing.
And that's true in a socioeconomic way too, because we all understand that there are inequalities inherent to any system. But we as a people can withstand a certain amount of inequalities in order to be able to keep going forward with the system, as long as the game isn't so horrendously juked in one way that it automatically makes it be like evil is winning always, right? It's like you have to be able to even have the illusion of progress sometimes in order to be able to keep the system going forward. And I think that was one of the issues that the Sybil system doesn't take into account, is the fact that it wants to reach such a like the Crystal Palace kind of utopia situation, while people like Shogo Matsushima will always appear and try to topple the Crystal Palace just for the very, very aspect of having human volition.
It's true.
And that's why we both decided that we were going to do Psychopaths as our main. As you can see, it took up essentially like maybe half of this episode.
But
it was awesome, man.
We'll have to give it its own episode in the future.
Yeah, well, we will. We will. This is only like a light frosting touch.
Yeah. What would be our honorable
the honorable mention? Well, my honorable mention will be Death Note. That will be Death Note. After you finish watching Psychopaths, and if you haven't watched Death Note, watch it right afterwards because you'll love it. How about you?
Honorable mention, man. I'd have to give it to Rick and Morty.
Okay, sweet.
And
it kind of goes without saying,
animated shows, not just
animated show. Yeah, animated shows.
So, I mean, for obvious reasons,
yeah.
I think everybody knows why Rick and Morty is an existentialist show.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we need to go into it too much.
Yeah.
I think I would say my favorite episode is Roy, where it's another one where you have to discern reality, where Rick takes Morty into a playground like place.
The
like
arcade?
This arcade place, and he puts him in a VR, which makes him forget his identity, and he lives a whole life as this character called Roy, and he makes all these choices that you'd expect a person would make, and then when he dies at the end of it, Rick just makes fun of him, like, "Oh my God,
like you decided to stay in the carpet,
beat cancer, went back to the carpet store. Oh my, you're terrible." And Rick plays, and then he's just like,
he's off the grid. He's lost the security card.
Just it makes you think about, oh crap, what if this is
like, what if you're just playing the game too
you're
safe?
Just playing a game too safe. That definitely made me question a lot of the choices in my life. It's like, I don't want to go back to the carpet store, man.
The last bit is books. So in terms of books, which book are you gonna pick, man?
I have to pick Debt, The First 5,000 Years by David Graeber. This book is really cool because it essentially shows how money came to be, debt, and how it's really shaped our whole perception as a society and our religions. So it breaks down the whole idea of debt and why we think it's such a big thing, and we attach it to our whole morality and all that stuff, you know? It's a good person is a person who pays his debts, and how we always feel like we need to be working for something. That's how we know that we're worth something. Our being is monetized in that sense.
Yeah,
like
it's much predicated on how much you owe, how much you have.
How much you have, right? And that is a really cool book in that way. I know we don't have too much time on this, so I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Honorable mention?
Honorable mention?
I've only read that one book.
I didn't even think about an honorable mention for this. Maybe come back to me.
All right, sounds good. We'll wait for it. My personal top number one existentialist book that I've ever read is one that I actually just read this year. And at the suggestion of Jordan Peterson. And that is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The main gist of the book is the understanding that although you perceive yourself to be a one kind of person inside of your mind, that doesn't necessarily mean that after you've completed the actions of that kind of person that you actually will transform into being that kind of person. To give you an example of that, Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, who is the main character,
impressive.
Yeah, or Rodya, as they call him in the story. He is a very, very poor ex-college student who wants to become an attorney, but unfortunately has run out of money. He has a lot of nice qualities about him. He's a very intelligent man. He's very handsome. They make a very big point of making him be a very attractive character to the reader in order for you to always be able to sympathize with him. Because the next thing that he does is murder 2 old ladies for their money. He literally takes a hatchet and chops them at the head. He cuts them at the head both times, and then he steals their money. But he does a horrendous bumbling job of the execution of actually doing the murdering and the theft. And the entire rest of the book is a deconstruction as to how one goes about living with that sort of alienation after one has committed such an atrocity that pretty much takes them away from the rest of society. Because every single aspect from then on out, puts him in a situation where he can no longer make real future plans anymore, because every time that he tries to make future plans, he starts thinking, oh shit, I murdered people and I'm gonna get caught for that, and eventually anybody who touches me is gonna also be tainted by that reality, so I can't actually be making any future plans anymore. I'm stuck.
Right.
I'm stuck all of the time. I'm stuck. Yeah, and that that horrendous nihilistic hole just continuously keeps getting worse and gets worse and gets worse.
He almost punishes himself.
Yeah, the crime. Yeah, he actually doesn't even need another arbiter to begin punishing himself for the crime that he already committed.
Wow.
And because of that, the book details what it means for you to believe yourself to be an extraordinary person, when in reality you might just be an ordinary one. Because that's one of the things that Rodion actually thinks of himself. He considers himself a Napoleon. That's how he sees it. He believes that there are two kinds of people: ordinary and magnificent, extraordinary people. And the extraordinary people, what always denotes them is the fact that they do not have any qualms about shedding blood when necessary. They're always down to do what is necessary in order to be able to bring forth that new dawn that they're always talking about. And he considers himself to be that kind of person too, as I'm sure a lot of you and and myself sometimes too. I consider myself an extraordinary person to a certain degree, a little different from
I think we're the chosen ones.
a little different from the normal mold, correct?
Yeah.
And what the book really wants to get at you, to all of those who are with me in that kind of belief, is to also allow humility to take fold in that, because once you start believing yourself to be so extraordinary that other ordinary people are expendable, you begin to alienate yourself away from the humanity that you so-called want to bring a new dawn to.
As you always tell me, come back and bring the ball with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we want to play too.
Yeah, we want to keep playing. It's the macro playing of multiple games. You can't just decide that you want to win at one game all of the time. You have to be judicious and understand that every single little game is ingrained inside of a meta game. Yeah, that was
again to finish this off.
That was it for me in terms of explaining
honorable mention?
Crime and Punishment. My honorable mention as far as books will also have to be in the vein of Dostoevsky, and it will be The Idiot. The Idiot is the next canonical book to Crime and Punishment. Mm-hmm. And in this one, the protagonist is this guy who has epileptic seizures. He's a prince who has epileptic seizures, and as a result of that, everybody around him considers him to be a bit of an invalid. So no one takes him too seriously. But because no one takes him so seriously, everyone is very forthright and honest around him, because no one believes that he's actually like taking anything, out of what they're saying. But he is all of the time, and he is able to examine them. And as the protagonist, you get to then feel the underlying examination of all of the characters. And it does it isn't as intense as Crime and Punishment, where there's murder and like all that intrigue and stuff. This is more down to earth situations, and that's why I didn't bring it up as my most existentialist, but it's up there, man. How about you? Did you ever think of your honorable mention?
My honorable mention has to go to Cosmic Trigger by Robert Anton Wilson. Have you heard of that book?
No.
I think its full title is called Cosmic Trigger: The Final Secret of the Illuminati. This book is really cool because it's by probably anybody who's into existentialism or into the weird has heard of the author Robert Anton Wilson. He's written a number of books, I think one of which is Prometheus, which was kind of popular. But this is the only book I've read by him. I've heard other stuff. But especially people who the psychedelic community probably knows this guy. I'm good friends with Timothy Leary back in the day and all that. But in this book, I think I enjoyed this book specifically because it introduces, I think for a while I was in this mode of like when you're thinking about seeking truth, you're always looking at it in a black and white model of like, how am I supposed to look? What's the right way to look at the world? How is the world really, for what it is? And when I read this book, Robert Anton Wilson introduces you to the idea of reality models rather than saying this is an objective reality. Rather that you have a reality model if it's making, if your reality model is useful for you to make any predictions for your future, keep you alive, help you to understand phenomena around you, this is it's a valid reality model that you can use.
So it's a pragmatist's kind of mentality to like universal conceptions then. Where it's just like you're just taking the most pragmatic kind of aspect to yourself and then just running with that, and as opposed to being like the world is this one way all of the time. It's like the world is the way that best constructs itself for my ends.
Yeah, for your ends. But you also, I think Robert Anton Wilson introduces you, because he starts out as anybody would as a materialist, and then he has certain experiences through psychedelic or otherwise, which makes him start questioning. It's like, okay, maybe there's different ways to look at reality. And so at the end of it, when you read Cosmic Trigger, I think you and Robert Anton Wilson, I think you just come to a point where you realize you can't be you can't have the hubris of thinking the way that you see things is the way, right? Is the way it is, so even right now, right?
Yeah.
Even right now, whatever reality model is working for you right now, there's always a different way, a valid way of seeing things. And so I was apprehensive to say like, okay, it's pragmatist. It's more like there's all these different reality lenses that you can put on. And so in the book, he kind of shows you like, okay, this is how you think things are. Here's a piece of information, and here's how these people see things, right? And here's the natural consequences of this world model. Yeah. If you adopt this
is how the world will manifest itself.
Right. And then, you know, he goes into all these crazy stories of like maybe people seeing UFOs, or how can we come in, talk about the whole UFO phenomenon. Is it real or is it not? Does it matter? You know, like how are people seeing this lens? You can take it so many ways. And he has this concept called the chapel peril or something. I think it's similar to your concept you always bring up of the absurd, where he just talks about all these experiences that just have so many that just cannot really be explained with objective, you know, the limits of science, because science can only kind of help you explain what can be measured. Right. Something that can't be measured, maybe an experience, an internal experience, like a psychedelic experience. How can you scientifically measure that? You really can't. It's always going on in your own head, but you are experiencing it. Right. So
yeah,
that the level of consciousness is not able to be measured in a scientific way. Okay. What's a different way to grok this?
That makes sense. Yeah, because I've always seen that dichotomy as science is descriptionist, right? Like it describes exactly how the processes go about working. Mm-hmm. And in a psychedelic experience, if we were looking at it through a materialist scientific lens, it's like these chemicals are just going off in your brain and they're opening neurochemical pathways that wouldn't normally be open, and then you're just going crazy inside of your head. That would be the materialist describing way of doing it. But then what you're saying is that this guy kind of gives you a more, with your universal models, it's like a more prescribing kind of way. It's like if you decide to take this kind of mentality, this is these are the symptoms that you'll end up like receiving from this kind of thought. And like I haven't read the book, so I'm also just inferring from what you're saying. And I would say that would fall in line with the pragmatist angle, because he is prescribing things that will help you in that particular moment. It isn't, as you said, that there is one objective model to reality, and you need to fix yourself to this model. It's more like you are a receptor to the reality, and then you can choose the lens that you put on yourself to that then morphs the reality to be.
You can adopt any lens at any given time. I think by the time I reached the end of the book, because he starts out kind of like his journey of like, hey, I was super materialist, all these things happened, and I got this and that.
And now what is he?
I met Timothy Leary. He's more agnostic in the sense of, not in the sense of he just doesn't believe anything.
Oh,
right?
Smart.
Yeah,
Smart.
I think he literally says that in the book sometimes, where he's just like, look, I don't believe anything, you know?
Zarathustra could be lying to you right now, you know?
So, it reminded me of, have you ever played, Assassin's Creed, the third one, the best one in the series with Ezio? No?
Oh, that's the second one.
That's the second one.
Yeah.
He's in the third one too. It's the second and the third one.
No.
It's when Ezio gets old.
Assassin's Creed 2 has 2 spin-offs.
Oh.
That is Revelations. That's the last one that you're talking about when he's old in Istanbul.
So that's still
and
part
Brotherhood. Yeah, it's
okay,
like
my bad.
Yeah, Assassin's Creed 2 is a trilogy in itself.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that was the best Assassin's Creed. But anyways, they have that that creed, right? Where it's like all is permitted, nothing is true, nothing is true.
Yeah,
and
nothing's true, everything is permitted. Yep.
Right. So at the end of it, I was thinking about that creed, and I always wondered what they meant by that creed. I was like, oh, I kind of see what they mean based on this guy's book, because you get so many lenses of reality in this thing where you're just like, well, damn. Mm-hmm. Everything is just a different way of looking at stuff. You can't objectively tell me like, oh, that's not the right way, this is not the right way, because everything is experience at the end of the day, and you're making it up for yourself, and everybody's making it up for themselves.
True. Yeah, the stones have no ethical concept. You're the one that has to go about creating the paradigm.
You have to create it. So it is a very, I think that one, super existentialist book. I think it's also up there. If I thought of it earlier, I might have switched it. But
it is what it is, right?
It is what it is. Cosmic Trigger definitely blew my mind and started making me think about things in a much more open-minded way.
It most certainly sounds like it would.
Yeah, definitely.
Either that, or if you're the kind of person that's just staunch, it would probably just cement you even more in your way.
Maybe. I think it's
like,
good
this guy is crazy.
Starting you out as a skeptic and then just bringing you, leading you on, and you're like, oh shit, okay. And especially because he also takes a scientific approach, because I remember when I had my psychedelic experience, I was like, okay, I have to explain this with science. And you go in there and then you find out all about, quantum mechanics and this and that, and double slit experiment, and you're like, okay. So even scientists have found out that reality is super weird, and perhaps you're making it up as you go along, depending on what you're expecting. So he goes into all these theories about how these quantum mechanics scientists had come up with these new reality models, non-local space-time, all this stuff. And he tries to show you, okay, if this is true, this means X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
This means psychic perception's true, time travel, whatever, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And these are all like people you could quote on this stuff. So when I was thinking, when I was reading this book, my mind was just like, whoa, there's just so many more possibilities than what I initially thought was real life. The shadows became 3D, I suppose. The shadows on the wall, I realized, okay, I've just been looking at shadows. There's a whole thing. This is a whole cave. There's an outside world, and that's a Cosmic Trigger. I think it's definitely a fun read.
Sounds like quite the honorable mention to me.
Yeah.
Well, that is our top 9 really, because Psycho Pass has got such high ratings on our end that you should probably just watch it twice. That's pretty much what we're saying.
Definitely.
But I'm hoping that this little exercise in getting to know us will be useful, just so you can understand who we are as the crew, and so that way you can also start getting some more resources from us as well. And
I would have to say you guys should let us know what's your top 5 most existential. Please. For all those categories, and if you agreed with anything we said.
Yeah, so I'm sure that there's probably many points of contention. We probably botched so many plots. So some people are probably fuming right now at the way that we explain some things. But hey, man, that's
your deal.
Yeah, and that's the learning experience forever and ever. If you really wanted to see robots, there's probably YouTube channels that'll give you exactly what you're looking for there.
Right.
But here, we're humans just trying to learn more and more. We want to give a special shout out to another fledgling channel called He's Racist, I'm Not. Just another small little podcast, just like our own, trying to do big things, and they're trying to look at things at news and other contemporary articles through a racial lens, and trying to see if we can get to some good synthesis in terms of our racial divides and where exactly is it that the biggest points of contention lie. A lot of things to be said on that angle, so check them out if you ever get the chance. But as far as we go, I think the Lethal Introspection crew is out.
We're out of here.